talking about 500 loans nationwide, a little less than 3 million. So that's short-term original.
Thanks, John. Well, I wanted to dive right into it and obviously talk about one of the biggest pressing matters in the marketplace. In the last 2 months, we've seen second, third, and fourth largest bank collapses in U.S. history. And there's a lot of speculation going on about what the future of regional smaller banks are. We have First Republic and absorbed by Chase, whether the larger banks just going to get larger at the expense of smaller regional banks. And how does that impact commercial real estate? Because, I'll ask you guys, you may know this better than I do. The periodicals, there's a broad range of what percentage of commercial real estate loans are issued by regional banks. I read it's as high as 70%, I read it's as low as 20%. No one really has an accurate stats. I'd love to hear from all of you in terms of, what the role regional banks play in commercial real estate finance, and how do you see that changing in 12 months?
I'm glad to jump right in. So regional banks play a very active role traditionally in commercial real estate lending. And right now the regional banks are under tremendous pressure and scrutiny and being very, very careful about lending money. So what has that done in real estate? It means that the banks are being more conservative. It means that they are asking clients to deposit money with the bank in exchange for them lending money out. It means that they sometimes want higher interest rates on their loans so that the math makes sense. So I think that what that's doing is, as the banks pull back, is the non-bank lenders like A10 and Emerald Creek and many others are stepping up to try to fill the void, as I think every bank tries to figure out what healthy real estate lending looks like today. So, we're definitely in a transitional time where every bank is meeting regularly, and I'm sure these guys will talk about it right now, and trying to make sure that the lending practices, as well as the depository relationships and all the ratios that they look at every single day are in line and make sense, and that the regulators believe that the banks are healthy. So it's definitely a transitional time.
And I think from the debt fund perspective, banks are going to play a major role forward, even if debt funds do take a larger market share of lending. I see many banks looking to expand their infuse practice and financing and credit facilities for debt funds. So I think things will look a little bit more like bondholders for CMBS and B-note buyers in the securitization world on a more regional level.
Now, are you guys seeing newer type lenders come into the market being created, or hedge funds getting from real estate agencies, private equity funds? When you look at the opportunity, real estate, we're going to go through a cycle, and everything's cyclical. We all lived through 2008, 2009. Real estate generally doesn't go anywhere. There's a lot of question marks that we have in the future, but real estate will be back on the U.S. economy. So at some point, when we're talking about, there's trouble in global finance, there's also the opportunity. And where do you see the opportunity?
Look what you're seeing in the marketplace. It was just an article this weekend in the New York Times. Look, Apollo, Blackstone, Pacific funds, because they see the opportunity in the market on a go-forward basis. There is a lot in the marketplace. So they see an opportunity to create yield for themselves by offering an alternative lending program into the market. So you'll see more non-bank lenders entering the States because they can get the yield required on the funds. So that makes sense.
I think there's been so many different capital sources out there for a while that have been struggling to compete with the banks, and now is the time where a lot of those lenders can actually win good loans. We actually closed an $18 million loan yesterday on a multifamily building in New York City that would always have gone to a regular bank, always. But the underwriting didn't work, the deal was tight, and a random private lender, whose name I won't mention, that has a 5-year fixed-rate bank-like product but at a slightly higher interest rate, was able to win that loan and write that loan. And it was the first time we did a regular multifamily loan with them in New York City, and I think that trend may continue. But ultimately, the banks are going to come back, and banks need to lend money, and the cycle is just going to work its way through the system.
I think it's a very sensitive balance, right? Lenders are heavily regulated, like ourselves. So we have to abide by certain ratios and certain numbers. So it definitely puts pressure on the fact that the cost of money, cost of funds, even for us, the banks, was much higher than last year. And if you months ago. And that will create the opportunity for other funding sources to come into the market and take advantage of it. That's the market.
Brian raised a great point. Banks have to lend, right? There's no other way for you to produce profit or revenue. Now, where are you seeing banks leverage? Where are deals taking place? What niches? What asset classes? Like, talk to us about that. Anyway, there's a free call. All of you, by the way.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, obvious reasons there's reservations in the office space segment of the market because of everything that's happening in the past 2 to 3 years. And investors are looking for other opportunities. There's always investors out there. These gentlemen brought up some very good points. There's always an ebb and flow between secondary markets, recognized depository institutions, depending on who has to contend with what. And then if there's interest in the market for this kind of paper, the secondary markets is what they refer to, and how attractive that is, how much demand there is. Whereas on the depository side, we have a company out there to a great extent. We have to service the communities that we're in, we're required. But I wouldn't get too panicky because the extent of the oversight on the depository institutions, especially over the past 10 years, I think has really produced good, solid quality paper. So what they're holding on to is really, really well scrutinized loans that are assessed and integrated, created the appraisals have a little more integrity, in my opinion, to them. The documentation is more substantial. So I don't think what we saw 12 years ago is remotely close to happening. In addition to the fact that a significant number of sponsors acquiring property, low leverage, or quite frankly outright. So a big part of the market is not even leveraged to some extent, especially on the smaller investor spectrum. So I think we're dealing with a far more stable market. People are getting spooked because a couple of financial institutions got a little squirrely to put in layman's terms. Did something they shouldn't have been doing, and it's creating some panic. I don't think the institutions on the broad spectrum are really as concerned about their
in the banking world is not directly related to credit. It's a matter of liquidity, deposits, right? We have the ability to actually, at least on my division, to go into securitizations and liquidity portfolios. So the yields are not quite there yet. I think the institutions or organizers, they're not quick to drop the yields. I don't think they're there yet, and I think there's going to be a reversal with the community banks will come back with a greater presence. Right? So it's an interesting market in the new year with the banks. It's really not, to me, it's more of a liquidity. A lot of the larger institutions were not properly hedged. Right? On the farm, we have excess capital, so there's no fear. Yes, it's going to impact the profitability, but overall, I think the market will agree and community banks will have a strong
And Pierre, I think you're asking where the opportunities are out there. And in terms of asset classes, one thing is in a cap rate, in a market where cap rates haven't widened in parallel with the cost of capital associated with rate hikes, you kind of need a little bit of a pop in your deal for it to make sense. So the deals that seem to be penciling are multifamily in Manhattan for market rate products, substantial rehab loans. We've done 2 of them recently. They even had little dynamics to them that made it more creative. So one of them had an antenna easement that was sold during the term of our loan, and we had a release provision for that. The other one had air rights that were sold. So substantial rehabs is still an interesting opportunity. Nationally, the industrial market has contract rents that are below the market, below market rents. So those are opportunities when you can acquire something at a cap rate that might be more consistent with, cap rates from 6 months ago, 12 months ago, or what was expected, but with the pop in the rent, your numbers can still make some sense. And then the other asset class that we've seen a lot of NOI growth in, although it's kind of smaller and doesn't have much of a history, is the supply chain driven industrial outdoor storage space, which is basically parking lots and container storage. That we've seen tremendous NOI growth, and a lot of the larger funds out there are investing in this space right now.
Jeff, when you talk about asset classes, obviously the easiest one to talk about is multifamily. Everybody's remaining relatively bullish on the future of multifamily for a number of reasons. When you take the housing market as an example, we have a tremendous shortage of supply in single-family housing, and even what supply does exist is unattainable for the majority of society. And all that's doing is creating more demand for multifamily rental properties, because what would be home buyers being forced to become? Remain renters for probably perpetuity. So that asset class, that's easy to analyze, but the more difficult one is when we talk about retail, which is through a transitional/precarious position pre-COVID, and office, which is completely been flipped upside down in the last several years. Are you seeing defaults pick up? Are you seeing workouts? And are you seeing the banks that have these assets navigate, this current environment?
Yeah, from a retail perspective, I think property markets are performing a lot better than the capital markets. And, there's never been an easier time to start a business than today with technology. But I think that retail is going to be more of a complement to many businesses out there than actual brick and mortar is needed. So I do think there'll still be positive absorption. We had 8 periods in a row, 8 quarters in a row of positive absorption in retail. But I'm not super bullish on retail because as a lender, it's a very difficult asset class from a capital markets perspective, because the tenants that are coming into place today, they might not have the credit that we were more comfortable with 15 years ago. There might be co-tenancy agreements or leasing agreements inside, stuff like that that provides asymmetric risk for a lender.
I actually see it slightly differently from my seat, which is interesting. If we were to think about this 12 or 18 months ago.
It's always going from it, by the way.
If we were to think about this 12 or 18 months ago, retail and hospitality were almost impossible to finance, right? Nobody would look, coming out of COVID, shopping centers were dead, and there was vacant retail everywhere, and hotels were empty. And now, you can't get a hotel room at an affordable rate anywhere. And most shopping centers, especially suburban shopping centers all over the country, the parking lots are full all day and there's not a lot of vacancy. So it's interesting how the market can shift pretty quickly, whereas office buildings today are obviously struggling the most. But to answer your question specifically about what banks are lending on, I'm actually, what I'm seeing is that banks are lending first and foremost to existing borrowers who they know. They're putting in a premium, and bridge lenders too. They're putting a premium on people that they know. People they have a good track record with, that they've lent to before, that have, maybe have a depository relationship. If it's a new customer for a bank, when it comes to a loan, there's a lot more scrutiny and probably a lower leverage point and a deposit conversation that's being had.
I'm seeing the same thing. All the banks that we represent, the majority of our loan transactions are for repeat owners. Long-standing clients.
Here from as being a community bank and a portfolio lender, we are a relationship lender. So banks, I think, always prefer to give some on the profitability side for stability and asset quality. Asset classes, hospitality, they're saying it's stabilizing, it's coming back, but I think lenders are still a bit hesitant to leveraging lending in the industry. Retail have tools to address any additional concerns, and we see further seasonality of the market being more stable. But the challenge remains. It's very easy to start a new business today. Do you treat it as a startup, or do you, knowing your markets, knowing your neighborhoods, create that comfort level that you need as a lender to lend on sometimes strictly retail?
Retail, our focus is on base credit quality, lease terms, and what's the weighted average remaining 5 years, especially in this big box, you have rollover risk in this marketplace, which you have to account for. And back to Brian's point, during the pandemic, everybody wrote off the neighborhood shopping centers, mom and pops. That was a dead class. That was one of the better performing retail assets. Office, we kind of kicked the can down the road on that because we have long-term leases. And now the reckoning, now the reckoning is coming. For us, we're still lending on retail. We will lend on office in certain markets, but we're highly selective because of all the headwind risks out there in the marketplace. But we're still actively lending on both retail and office.
I'm going to harp on office a little bit. I'm going to take a survey. How many of you work from home full-time, work remote? 5% of them. How many of you work from home, Jordan? Hybrid schedules. How many of you go to the office every day? You're in real estate. You need to use the asset you're selling, right? Like, go to the office every day. Why are you still home? It's been 3.5 years. Like, I mean, it's absurd. Like, that's the whole point of this, is that this isn't a trend in the market, right? Like, for any of you who are in sales, if you're not in every day, you should be ashamed of yourself. Like, you cannot sell the asset you don't use. Like, you have to be there. Business is the economy. You can't survive in this virtual world. There's some components. There's some components that are hybrid, that are here forever, that have the benefit. But for the most part, the biggest issue we see is this continues. You use the word reckoning. There could be a significant reckoning. When you look at Midtown Manhattan Financial District, we have 50%, roughly 50% occupancy on a daily basis. The best part about this, from my perspective, is I go in every day. Mondays, you have 33% occupancy. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, you have 50 to 66% occupancy. Fridays, you have 25%. The workforce unilaterally determines they're more productive from home on Mondays and Fridays. Go figure, right? Rather convenient. I'd like to call it a 3 o'clock on Friday myself, right? At the end of the day, what you're going to start seeing, this is becoming more and more of a prevalent topic, is conversion of these office buildings. Because, you're kicking the can down the road. It's a perfect way to do it. We haven't seen an uptick in defaults. We haven't seen an uptick in foreclosures. There's been a lot of workouts. There's been a lot of extensions. That can only go on for so long, right? Like, you can only kick the can down the road for so long. At what point, where's the breaking point in terms of where you start seeing these defaults? And what do you lend a lot of credibility to the potential of converting offices to housing?
So we do a lot of development. We are in the affordable housing market. We work with HDB. Most of our clients are in business. That's the comfort level we have. Conversion of an office to maybe residential, right? That's what they're saying. I really want to see how it will be achieved, because an office building is designed in a completely different way than the typical residential. I was having a conversation yesterday with a developer, a friend of ours, client, and we were talking about plumbing, right? Your typical office structure is completely different than your residential. So who's going to cover that tremendous cost of conversion? So unless there is some type of subsidy at the city level, at the state level, at the national level, if that's what the powers that they want to do, I think it will be very challenging. It won't be easy.
Yeah, the numbers are tricky, right? It's like, as an example, if there was a mid-block garment center B- office building that was worth $50 million 5 years ago and it was full of tenants, those buildings today are half empty. The rents are down 30 to 50%, so that the value of that building went from 50 million, maybe cut in half, which is below the debt amount. So so the question is, and you're asking a really good question, is what's going to happen with all these buildings? The lenders don't want to take them all back, because what are they going to do with it? They can't sell it and recoup their money. So it's a good point. At some basis level, there would be a developer that would consider buying the loan or buying the real estate and trying to convert it. But in order for that deal to pencil, they have to buy it so cheap, right? Because of the construction costs to then convert it and stabilize it. So we're just not quite there yet in the cycle. It's like right now we're at the point where the owners of those properties are accepting reality, and they're talking to their lender, and they're evaluating their options, none of which are great. And at some point, there's going to be a basis reset of some sort, and ultimately the ones that can be converted will be converted.
I mean, Pierre, I'm based in South Florida, so there's a project going on in Miami right now between Swire and they just purchased a private property on Brooklyn Avenue facing the water. That's their response to an antiquated building that was built in the 70s and 80s, which New York City is full of. Tearing it down, and be putting up 1.2 million square foot lifestyle building, which will consist of office, residential, and retail. I think that's where you'll see a lot of these new developments going. If you have the ability to tear down an antiquated building, because the cost of renovation is prohibitive in most instances. It's going to cost you more to renovate than to build new. So that's the factor that you have to take in.
No, it's a great point. One thing to add to that, though, you said South Florida. That's where it's easier. It's easier for you to analyze it. South Florida is tremendous. I mean, Florida and Texas have been the greatest beneficiaries of what's gone on the last couple of years. The highest influx of new residents. And your South Florida economy is skyrocketing. You know, where like my biggest fear is I look at Grand Central, right? If you look at the San Francisco market, I mean, the San Francisco downtown market is, I think, the hardest hit city maybe outside of Chicago in the country. Those markets, what happens to those markets?
I just saw an article that said some of the big downtown office buildings in San Francisco were down 70–80% in value. Yeah, and then every day you're seeing articles about, write-downs from some of the large mortgage REITs with regards to their office portfolio. Not that they did anything wrong, just a shift in the market, and that's kind of what we're going through right now in the office side.
Yeah, I actually think those are fantastic opportunities, because once what that property would trade for in its intended use has been decimated, now your entry point is low enough, and that's a perfect...
Does this mean you'll lend on them?
Not at this stage.
Great question.
Who's the bridge guy? It's up to him over there. It's been done before. This is not reinventing the wheel. It's location. If you have a building like that, that's in a residentially desirable location, downtown San Francisco is Gold Coast. It's insane what a home costs there. It's not something that's new. If you look at the west side of Manhattan, you have 100-year-old buildings, 120-year-old buildings that were warehouses. You go to the egg district, the meatpacking district. All those buildings were 100+ years old. And what happened? Developers saw how it was highly desirable as a residential location. They went in and they figured out how to cost-effectively do the infrastructure to get the plumbing, electric, and so on in. And then, again, the entry point was reasonable because, prior use was obsolete, no demand for it, and it required a lot of capital investment. But there's going to be opportunity. In contrast, if you have a major office complex in the middle of nowhere out, on the island or something where it's not conducive to that type of a conversion, you're going to have a problem. So it's not a one philosophy fits all, in my opinion. It's going to be subjected to where the building is and if it's conducive to residential conversion, especially in that extensively populated areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main problems for converting to office is light and air, and just quality housing in general. The layouts for office buildings are generally much larger floor plates and make it difficult, so you have a very large loss factor, which isn't really conducive to multifamily.
Now, are you seeing new types of loan products enter the market given all the challenges you described? I did another panel earlier this morning about agency lending, and it's just focused predominantly on the multifamily sector. And somebody brought up that, there's going to be a 30-year amortization that we've all become accustomed to. It was somewhat arbitrary, right? It's just been something that the market's been adopted as long as we've all been doing this. And why not make it a 35-year amortization and make it more affordable to just with the reduction of cash flow? Why not 40 years? Are you seeing banks change the types of loan products and what type of loan products, what those be?
One of the changes that I've seen right out of the gate, and I'm not sure if this applies to both of you, is that there were a bunch of banks in New York that used to just, when we would send them in a loan quote, they would give you a rate. They would say, okay, we're going to make this loan at 4%. Even if it closes in 3 months from now and interest rates have gone up 50 basis points, we're still going to close your loan at 4%. Now we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing banks basically say the borrower has to take the risk for the term until we close. So these loans are spread-based for a period of time and moving around. So that's one of the main changes that we've seen is banks looking for a little bit more interest rate protection.
So I'll be a little self-promotion here. Anything capital, we've always had flexible terms. Rate locks, we can give you a 90-day rate lock at 1 point, but your rate is, you don't float until you close. So you have certainty of where your rate's going to be 90 days out. Sign an LOI, pick this expense deposit, rates that's on the term sheet, this is great. You close within 90 days. Interest only, we do offer an interest only component to all of our loans. It could be full term IO, it could be partial IO, and we do have some flexibility in terms of our prepayment. On the 7-year, we'll have 4 years of yield maintenance within a 3-2-1, which differs from the securitizations, which is typically a 7 or 10-year yield maintenance of defeasance. So offering flexibility is part of our program. It's always been part of our program. Probably will evolve a little bit more as we get further into this. If you're looking for flexibility of new loan products, it's something that we've always had and offered.
The problem, again, with regulated banks is there is a norm, as we said. So for a bank to deviate from that norm, you have to have conversations with your examiner friends and kind of like see what is reasonable. 35-year, 40-year amortization sounds great, right? It alleviates much of the pressure for the borrower, for the borrower, but I can't think of the OCC smiling, saying originations on the 40-year amortization, regardless if it's a balloon.
What choice may they have?
Choices are very limited. So the question is the regulatory environment willing to accept changes and modifications of the structure of your typical loan product to alleviate the pressure that we have today?
Yeah,
That's a big question.
To your point, though, loans that are originated from the depository institutions that are held on the or portfolio like we do, those loans are monitored. The regulators come in, particularly in the FDIC, because they want to make sure their investment in financial institutions is preserved. So they literally will risk rate post-closing, a year, 2 years after a closing, 3, 4 years after. They'll come in and they'll pull a file and look at it, and look at how you underwrote the file. They'll look at what was done, the methodology behind the basis of the loan. And they can downgrade the loan. They can say to the lender, what you did here was pretty risky. We don't like what you did. We want you to increase your reserves for this loan. Put 20% more in reserves. And now you have a loan, you've closed, the client's got a loan, he's making his payment, but now your cost of your business just went up. So you have to be cautious on this front. And the secondary front, once it's gone, that's it, you're done. But you have to be super cautious. And that's the kind of constraints you're going to see. That's why I feel when you're working with depository institutions, they're going to be more cautious in how they're going about things, but at the same time, avoiding, on the residential side, we refer to those as high-risk features. Interest only, amortization greater than 30 years, or negative amortization, things along those lines. You can't do them residentially and keep your foreclosure safeguards. So if it works on the one side, on the other side, you really may want to contemplate that philosophy too, if you're an owner. Because I would think any sound real estate investor wants to maximize cash flow. Of course, that's the purpose of the investment. But you also want to preserve the investment. So something to think about.
I think every single bank today is willing to speak to their borrower and potentially extend a loan if the borrower can't get out, traditionally refinance. But what we're seeing is that the majority of those negotiations and modifications require the borrower to write a check to pay down their loan a little bit, to bring it into a healthier position. So it's in a way we're right now we're in a period of the cash in refinance, as opposed to the cash out refinance, which is what we were in for a very, very long time, where borrowers could constantly just go from one bank to another and refinance and pull money out to buy other buildings or put it in their pocket. Today, it's kind of flipped a little bit, and in order for the borrower to refinance their debt, they have to write a little bit of a check, whether that's with their current lender or with the new lender.
Brian, I'm glad you brought that up because it gets me to the next point I want to talk about. When we talk about refinancing, we have $1.5 trillion of commercial real estate debt coming up for maturity between now and the end of 2025. For as long as I've been in this, that's the largest sum I've seen come up for maturity in a short period of time. And explaining this in terms of why that's the case, we had a big refinance boom in 2013, 2014, when the real estate market started recovering from the Great Recession. And those terms are 10-year terms. And that 10 years coming up. And obviously due to the repayment penalties in those loan documents, refinancing during the COVID era, low interest rate environment was cost prohibitive. What's going to happen when you talk about 1.5 trillion of debt? So you're going to be busy with refinances, all of you, right? Presumably, acquisitions seem like they've slowed down, obviously slowed down, but refinances will pick up. But you're right, there's going to be cash in refi in a lot of situations, and a lot of owners won't have the cash to do that. There's going to be capital calls that won't be able to be met. Where do you see that level of debt being handled in terms of keeping liquidity in the marketplace?
So this is a tricky one, because every single transaction is unique. I think that as those refinances come up, if you can traditionally refinance them with a lender because the cash flow is good and the value is there, that's great. But in reality, you've got a lot of properties that are going to be experiencing a stressful refinance process where they have to weigh the options of extending with the current lender and writing a check, or potentially selling the property. But there are a lot of alternative lenders that are out there that if it's a good borrower and a good story, that would consider refinancing the asset. But even those lenders sometimes want the borrower to write a little bit of a check and recommit to their property, especially if they see that they've pulled money out of the property in the last couple of years. They feel like it's legitimate in this part of the cycle to ask the borrower to recommit to the property and write a little bit of a check. So, every refinance kind of stands on its own. There is capital in the market, even if it's tighter and rates are higher. So, each one is going to be its own grind to try to figure out what the right execution is for the borrower.
So if I'm in a different mindset of this. I think loans that were made 7 to 10 years ago are in a much different position than loans that were made 3 to 5 years ago that were done on an IO basis and they were securitized through the CLO market. Those loans had no amortization. So typically those loans were also levered up. So they got far greater leverage than they would have qualified under an amortizing loan basis. Now those loans 3 to 5 years ago are going to become due in the near term. The underwriting that was done on the originations of those loans are going to pencil out far different today. Rates were 3.5%, 2.5% back then. You had a 20% year-over-year increase in rents. Those factors are gone. So those are the loans that are probably going to have the most pain for the sponsors, because they're not going to have to write a little check, they're going to have to write a big check to right-size the value of the property given the loan size. Is either write a check, do an equity call, or you're going to be selling the property. So there's going to be opportunities in the marketplace for either refinancing or buying in these properties, purchasing of these properties, because their exit strategies are limited. Getting back to the loans that originated 2013, 2014, they've had some amortization. Leverage is probably lower given to where today's values are, even though values have come down. And again, leverage is fine. It should be fine at 60, 65, 70%. You didn't have a huge run up in values. So those probably will have a little less pain. Yes, the refinance, we like to see a commitment by the sponsor by having some additional equity to show your commitment to the transaction. So there are opportunities in the marketplace.
And what Mike is saying is, for 10-year paper, there's just been tremendous record growth, at least in multifamily or industrial. So, it's going to be the more recent, kind of the 2021-22 vintage, the CLO type deals that are going to have more of a challenge, which aren't necessarily coming to us.
Let me just throw this number out to you. This was in Wall Street Journal this morning. 66% of CLO originations in 2021 was multifamily. 80% of the CLO originations in 2022 were multifamily. So you can see that people were stretching on leverage just to be able to get the pensive returns. So again, those are the transactions that you're probably going to see the most pain. And think about it, 80% of the originations in the CLO market were for multifamily.
Also, the 1.5 trillion, although it sounds like a staggering number, I'm not sure how much commercial real estate debt there is, but it's north of 6 trillion. So over a 2-year period to have, call it 20%, that's not that staggering.
I think on the residential area, the 10-year paper with the appreciation that we have might not be as much of a risk. The 5-year paper can be a community bank, relationship driven. We work with the borrowers, our cost has gone up. So we're there to work it out for everyone's sake. But I don't expect the long term that's coming up to be as much of an issue, more of an issue over the last 5 or so years, where I think we might if banks are going back to the amortization issue. If we have amortization on the loans, our risk is less than an IO, which is why I don't think some of the new products on the IO or the loan amortizations taking in, for example, would come to our reset markets.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit everything right on the head. Can't go against anything you said. The only bright light I would say is on the multifamily spectrum is you do have the ability, though, for rent escalations that are greater than on the retail office. It's usually 5-year term leases with set percentage increase year-over-year escalations. On the residential side, you generally can correct a 2-year lease, but they're usually 1-year leases, and if in the event the market's taken off, you can adjust the rent to a greater percentage than that. I think that's going to be the safer space, with one exception. I'll come back to that in a moment. The other thing that we're losing track of, it's not just the cost of the financing of the loans. There's been a single thing called inflation, and property owners are under ever increasing pressure because their property taxes are going up, their fuel costs are going up, their interest costs are going up for the building, their insurance is going up disproportionate to the escalations in the leases, and that's a greater pressure too. So you have two pressures, that are going to come to a head now. The good thing is, hopefully the rent escalations have kind of been offsetting that, and the guys who've been paying down a bit of principal are going to be in a better position. But the high leverage guys that came in the door highly leveraged with an IO type situation, that's going to be a problem. The thing that I want to come back to is on the residential side, it's not entirely a safe haven. You got to be super careful of properties that have rent regulated units. It's not like the old days where you can deregulate a unit by going through certain steps after going through a certain period of time, or even buying out an occupant. And the new laws that are going into place pertaining to how you can adjust or increase the rents is very stringent, and the consequences for violating that are not at the moment. They can go back. You can have to pay back rent and adjust. So you may underwrite a loan and think you're getting a certain debt service coverage and find out that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the landlord increased the rent on those controlled units to a point that he wasn't supposed to. You have to roll those rents back, pay back the money to the tenant, and now you have a much lower debt service ratio. Again, what did I say? You're in an environment now where inflation is killing you. So your cost to operate is going up. Your fuel costs are going up. Your insurance is going up. The killer is repairs and maintenance. Try to deal with a trade now. Call a plumber or an electrician to come in to do some work, or a roof, or you do low level work on your facade. It's painful, but your rents are not increasing. You have matched that expense. So if you're in a multifamily with rent-regulated units, especially if they compose a significant part of the rent roll, super careful, super careful.
What I'm going to say is you're a mind reader. I was going to say the exact same thing, almost. Look, the New York City, we still have a lot of old housing stock, right? Expenses, operational expenses on the older buildings are much, much higher. So everything has gone up. Rent increases are more difficult, are more challenging. Prior to, I think it was June 19, where they passed out the regulation, you could raise your rents to something that was meaningful. Nowadays, you're going to go and do an investment, do a renovation, and if you're lucky, you can go up to maybe $80, right, or so. Now, the good thing, what I see, at least from our point of view, is in our portfolio, is that this older housing stock is not highly leveraged either, for the most part. So maybe that's where we get some balance, and will help them to go into another refinance, go into a modification that is still reasonable, and it's would still make it work for both the lender and the borrower. The new multifamily, investors want to maximize cash flow. They're going to pursue the idea. There are lenders that were known and notorious for offering that product. How risky you want it to play?
I wanted to ask Bill a question, one last question before we open up the questions from the audience. Obviously, it's going to require U.S. having a crystal ball, but the Fed has given indication that this last rate hike may be the last one that we encounter. We had a 25 basis point rate hike a couple weeks ago. Assuming that does take place and the Fed stops raising rates, where do you see interest rates a year from now? In terms of, when we're talking about refinancing, talking about, getting the market back going. Clearly there's a lot of cash on the sidelines, a lot of people that are apprehensive. Everybody in the world thinks rates will be lower a year from now than they are today. Where do you all forecast rates?
Does anybody have a crystal ball?
My crystal ball says, look at history. I love looking at charts. And if you look at you can probably just Google it, I'm sure you can pull it up on the internet. Just look at where the cost of funds are and have been for the past 75 years. Probably about how far back you can go. And you'll see that the past 10 years we've been living in a delusional world. The rates have been artificially repressed to bring us back from where we were. I think the last time we were remotely close to a rate environment on par was in the 50s. People, that was the last time someone had a 5% mortgage on their home. So, and when you would see that, it was, how is this? What did you do? Who did you know? From then until 5 or 6 years ago, what has it been? 8 years now, lose track. That kind of cost of funds and borrowing expenses unheard of. And then what did we do? We breached that flaw that hadn't been seen in 70 years, 60 years. And we breached that. And we were holding it down to stimulate the economy, keep things going so things wouldn't fall apart. But funds weren't floating to market. They were being artificially repressed. Now they're starting to float to market. So now you're starting to see rates be at levels where they're supposed to be. And you just got to get used to it, lightly.
Yeah, I would second that in terms of monetary policy is countercyclical in nature, so be careful what you wish for with lower rates. It means a lot of other things are negative going on out there. And how we try and identify what rates are going to be in the future, because we recognize other people are smarter out there than us. And identifying it is, we look to what the interest rate hedge market is doing. So you can look at the forward SOFR curve, and 2 years from now on the forward SOFR curve, the expectation is a compression of about 200 basis points.
I really don't, no one knows, of course, the direction of the interest rate. The charts point down, but nobody has a crystal ball. But I don't think our current lending environment is a high interest rate environment. I started in the late 80s with double digits, and we considered it a healthy market. Right, so it was, so it really, it's a 3% market, I think, was unhealthy. It showed weakness.
Speak with you
So,
think what you also need to look at, regardless of interest rates, is liquidity in the marketplace. You can have lower interest rates. For example, this 25 basis point last hike, red liquidity was equated to a 50-point rate hike because of the pullback in liquidity in the marketplace. So you can have low rates, but if there's no liquidity in the market for lending, it plays off one another. So you can see a reduction in rates, but if lenders are not willing to put capital out on the streets because they're not sure of the direction of cap rates or further interest rates, we could have, to your point, you could be careful what you wish for, because yes, we could have lower rates, but if there's no liquidity in the marketplace, lower rates are not going to benefit anyone.
Yeah, that's when you see spreads like that.
I have no idea which way rates are going personally, but our job is to broker mortgages, whether they're 3% or 10%, and so that's what we're going to try to do, and help each borrower one deal at a time. That being said, I hope rates go down in a year, because that's it makes certain things less painful, although I do get the bank pressures to make money and earn yield, so there's a healthy balance. So we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. But it's been a lot of rate increases from the Fed at this point. You know, we've seen interest rates go up an unprecedented amount in a short time. And I think that, to your point about liquidity, right now there's not a lot of lending activity on the bank side. Everyone's kind of paused and slowing down. But over time, as the need to lend money is there and more banks get back into the market, the competitive forces kind of take over a little bit also, and in general will, I think, start to push borrowing rates down for borrowers, just because lenders have to compete to get the capital out the door at some point. So,
well, rates hopefully will go down, but I don't think it was the rate number that created much of the pressure. It was just the speed, where rates went up extremely fast, and it should stabilize. It might be 100 basis points, it might be 200 basis points, but I'm not sure if we will see what we had before this crisis. Financing at 103%. I don't think we're going to be seeing anytime soon.
Seriously, I mean, who thinks that we're in a high interest rate environment right now? I mean, probably historically we're right in average. I mean, given where we were at 24 to 36 money, so that 36 months, that was really cheap capital out there on the street. So I think a lot of folks got accustomed to it, and now it's a reset in their mind. There's definitely a disconnect between sellers and buyers in the marketplace. We're not going to have...
And between borrowers and lenders, but it is stabilizing. I really do think it is stabilizing at this point. The shock was there. Rates went from 3% to 6.5%, and it's kind of back now where most lenders are lending in that 5.5% to 6% range, and it feels like it could be stable.
Now, we have a couple minutes left. I wanted to open up for questions. Yeah.
Quick question. When it comes to your caliber institutional investors, let's say your BlackRocks or your Blackstones or similar companies that have been getting bailouts essentially, is there any trickle-down effect correlation that you guys see happening throughout the end of this year with the remainder of the smaller investors in your space when it comes to the real estate market?
I wasn't aware Blackstone got bailout.
No, I said caliber investors of that size. Those large investors that have been getting bailouts.
I'm unaware of it. I'm more aware that the larger investors have walked away from projects. The projects that they're walking away from is the interest-only projects. So they got caught up in frenzy as well, but being bailed out, I haven't heard of it.
We have time for one or two questions. In the back, yeah.
Since they got rid of the vacancy allowance, have any of you guys heard about the city offering money to get the units that owners elect to remain vacant on the market? Can I
Let me go. I'll come to you.
Oh.
Yeah, talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you. So when they got rid of the vacancy allowance, a lot of owners elected to keep their apartments vacant. I might have read somewhere that the city is electing to give a large sum of money to some of the landlords to convert their apartments for habitability. Have you guys heard of that?
I heard something to that nature, but where I really heard it was that it wasn't enough money to do anything material, and that was kind of the only headline I saw. I didn't think it's deep.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's do one last question. No? Yes.
I can give a question to Ryan. Ryan, since you're brokering mortgage, where are you seeing that lenders are kind of like, how is the battle finance? Like, it's going to be more competitive for a particular borrower. Where are you seeing that they're probably showing more flexibility, and where are you seeing that they're holding their line and they're like, this is our good rate?
Yes, I think it's a good question, and I think that you kind of have to separate the banks and the non-banks a little bit, but I do think that lenders are being more disciplined and cautious in every single area. So the way they're underwriting to a maximum loan amount has, I think, become more conservative. I think the interest rate that they want to charge has gone up a little bit. When it comes to other features or credit enhancements, lenders may want more guarantees or more money in reserve to protect themselves. So I think that every single lender, goes about protecting themselves a little bit differently. And, I think that the banks are more focused on getting yield, maybe getting deposits at a slightly lower loan amount, while maybe some of the private lenders that aren't as sensitive to the interest rate movement may just want certain structures in place to protect them. But they also are probably lowering their loan amounts a little bit just because of where interest rates are and where we are in the cycle. So I think that it's more important than ever for a borrower to run a real process. You can't just go to one bank today and think you're going to get a great loan. You really have to shop out in the market. You really have to negotiate. You really have to pay attention to detail. We used to be able to just send submissions to banks and get quotes and do loans all day, every day, like a factory. And now there's no bid if you do that. You really have to dig into the details, tell the story, sell the borrower, know your numbers, explain the borrower's history. I mean, the details are a lot more important than ever.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for doing this today. This is super informative.
priced out.
lose your appetite pretty quickly now. This market is structured for all units. Insurance market going up.
Start calling around.
You gotta shop it out. Sometimes you can find some better food. It might be an expensive cook. You want to make sure you have all parts of it. Good program. Expensive still at the best price. That's our job. We're brokers. We have relationships with tens of different brands. We send commissions to them right for you. Get the best deal. Compare the quotes in the course of the day and say, oh, this company is XYZ. Magic is better. That
So you guys don't
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 240 State of Private Lending. What are you seeing today? This panel is sponsored by Scotsman Guide and RCN Capital. We're going to just really quickly have everybody introduce themselves and talk about their company for just a few seconds. Larry, I'm going to start with you on the end.
Hi, I'm Larry Ellsman, the founder and CEO of Ellsman Law. We're a law firm based in Great Neck. We specialize in representing permanent lenders, private lenders, so businesses, as well as investors, developers, and builders.
Enrique Gomez, I'm from Commercial Real Estate Co. Been in the commercial real estate business for over 35 years. We are commercial lenders, upgrades, and we also cooperate with the RCA.
Hello, my name is Samuel Magelli. I'm with Lending One. We are a private lender specializing in investment property financing, mainly using cash flow analysis from the debt service.
My name is Robert Ford. I'm with the Street
out of New Jersey. We specialize in New York, New Jersey, commercial and residential.
Good afternoon. Ed A. Marder, Executive Vice President of National Production for Newbridge Commercial Lending. We are direct nationwide commercial bridge lenders, every state in North and South Dakota. Mixed use, multifamily, light industrial, warehouse, office, retail, self-storage, all that good stuff. Offering bridge money nationwide.
Bill Pedagogo, Vice President of Trust Mortgage. We specialize in Ginnie Mae securities, specifically for multifamily, assisted living facilities, and nursing homes nationwide. Acquisition refi, 35 years. New construction, sub-rehab, 40 years fixed.
Perfect, thanks so much. And finally, I am Jeffrey Tesh, CEO of RCN Capital, nationwide lender to the non-owner occupied investment space, focusing on single families 1 to 4 nationwide. So this panel is about private lending, and panelists, my guess is things are busier than ever for private lenders, mainly because the source of your capital is tied to very different sources than traditional conventional lenders. And it's giving the private lending community the freedom to be able to make loans in some of these challenging times. And I'm going to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the market today, especially as it comes to how sources of liquidity and capital are solving some of the problems that the folks in the audience are really starting to see today.
Yeah, so we get to see it, or I get to see it, Newbridge gets to see it nationwide, including tertiary markets. And, you know, even though we do light to moderate rehab and give those funds to the borrower, we're seeing a lot of acquisition business as well. You know, some savvy investors looking to purchase and acquire while you're tied up with a bank loan right now and having your DNA extracted. You can do a non-recourse loan with no financials, no PG, and close in 18 to 21 days. We go to 70% loan to value, so we're pretty aggressive in that space on those asset classes I mentioned. And we'll actually, as I said, keep it the rehab money flows. We recently, like most, have become a little conservative on office space, which we've reduced, as of a few days ago, 60%. But for the obvious reasons. We see a lot of repurpose, not to rehash history, but everyone knows with COVID, it created a lot of tenants not paying, it created a lot of disturbance where people are just not bankable. And if you're not bankable, for whatever the reason, whether it's credit, whether it's income, whether it's vacancy factor, the building's a little scratchy and denty, or in an environment where lenders are not renewing a customer of 20 years because they're not touching a shopping center these days. We'll do maturity performance and all those.
So that's spot on, Ed. Sam, I'm going to rephrase the question to you. Why are private lenders, because of the nature of how they're set up and their capital stack, why do they have the liquidity to be able to make loans today when so many of our fellow commercial lenders are struggling? Why is it? Why are private lenders continuing to win today?
I think it's the access to capital, right? So if you've got the right backer, the right parent company that wants to invest in that space, they'll be able to provide liquidity. In our case, it would be to residential real estate investors, whether it be the mom and pop that owns 2 or 4 or 5 rental properties, or to the institutional investor that's going to own 50, 200, even 500 rental properties. A lot of those loans are written on balloons. They've been written for the last 7 to 8 years in that space. They're all coming due. The banks aren't going to be there to refinance any of them, and presents a great opportunity for us to take advantage of.
So that's interesting. So the nature of the capital stack is different for private lenders, and you touched on the fact that a lot of loans are starting to come due. I think that's a trend mainly because of the nature of the capital that was deployed 5, 6, 7 years ago in the non-owner occupied investment space. How is the LTVs and the challenges that folks are having with those monies coming due, how are you handling them as a lender?
I mean, right now, the good part of it is these loans were written 5 years ago, so there's a lot of equity, right? So it's not like they're coming due and they're going from 5% to 7 or 8%. The loans were written 5 years ago in this space. They're very similar to what rates are today. I mean, really, the 6.5 handle kind of thing has been out there. But if in certain cases, if they were written on short-term notes, there's going to be some pain there. There's going to be some sort of cram down. We're going to bring money to the table to refinance the balloon. I'm hearing that more in the commercial space, not so much the residential investor space. And I guess we'll see what happens in the next 6 to 12 months with the banks.
So Enrique, let me go to you. So are you seeing these sort of things happening with commercial loans? Are you seeing cram downs, things like that? What are you seeing in your space today?
I mean, right now we're still short inventory, and we're seeing a lot of people are trying to get out of the loans. They're coming up with the difference of the money. A lot of times, the loan to value is tight, so they're coming up with the difference of the money, so they can come with and get the money.
How often is that happening? How often are folks having to come to the table with money today?
It's a lot of times they're coming up with a purchase of a refi, and they're finding the money, finding some refinancing of the properties that they have. They're going to their friends. You set a deal with a guy looking for family members. They got the difference of the money, so they pay off the bill that was due. For sure.
So let's talk about asset class, right? What asset classes are you seeing that be more prevalent than others, where they're coming short, they're having to bring monies?
More of the warehouses, offices. A lot of warehouses, they don't have the difference. There's not enough equity when they go pay for property.
Interesting. That is interesting. So Larry, let me go to you. Larry, as one of the leaders in the space when it comes to closing loans for private lenders, maybe you could go 30,000 foot view and talk about what kind of deals you're seeing, whether it be some of the challenges that Ricky talked about or some of the potential wins that Ed talked about. What are you seeing high level?
I see this as a potentially winning market for a traditional private lender. Having been through so many markets and challenges in the last 30 years representing lenders, private lenders, these are the types of loans that they want to put on their balance sheets. These are loans that are actually performing loans, you have strong borrowers, and the banks are pulling back because of market conditions. They could be tied up in some of the short-term rates that they're involved in. But to pass some of these loans off now to the private lenders, these are the exact loans they actually want. When the banks are pulling back, traditionally, this is where the private lenders is. And personally, in our firm, we are busier when these times start to occur.
That's interesting. And are you seeing it in a certain geography, or is it playing out all over your area?
I haven't seen too many differences in different states and markets. We work in 30 states, 30 plus states. Obviously, we're based here in New York, and our strength here is in the Northeast. But I kind of see it even at this point in time. What I have seen is with less volatility becomes more deals. I think with the volatility that occurred in Q3, Q4 last year, it kind of put a halt to a lot of business. A lot of operators, lenders, investors, they were kind of, everybody pulled back at the same time. Not only that, but some stability in the rates, where there can at least be some projections as to where we're going to be over the next 6 months at least. People feel a little bit more comfortable about putting money out, knowing what the valuations are on the properties, and the investors feel a little bit more comfortable about coming in. I also do see the investor and the borrower, people have money. They're waiting for opportunities. They've done well over the last 4 or 5 years, by and large, and they have capital to deploy, and they're waiting for these distressed assets. That's when the private money really starts to get busy. In your traditional bridge market, when there are assets or distressed assets that these investors can purchase.
And that is a great segue to you, Bill. What are the investors saying today? Is there cash on the sideline to deploy? What's the feeling out there?
I believe there's a lot of cash on the sidelines to deploy. We rely heavily on bridge lenders and private money lenders as a permanent takeout. And what we're seeing today, more so than we ever have before, are these notes coming due, they're cash out refinancing, they're going right back to the bridge because we do take a little bit longer. So most of our developers are looking for opportunity. We have, years of relationship with these people, and they're ready to go right away. They're actually broadening their resources on the bridge money, which I've met a lot of people today, and some I already know, and we've been bouncing a lot of stuff off each other. We operate primarily in the multifamily space, which is a similar animal, but again, to your point, they're really just waiting for opportunity, I think, right now. And we have a developer that makes the deal because he wants to wait another 6 to 9 months to see what happens, but he's very liquid, and so are all his colleagues right now.
So that's an interesting comment, right? A developer wants to wait another 6 months just to see. What's that conversation like? How does that even work when they come to you and say, you know what? I think we're going to wait another 6 months.
He can piss us off. It really depends on
there it is.
How much underwriting has gone into it, and but no, to your point, and you're correct. It's frustrating, but there's opportunity out there. And typically, when you get a developer in, they don't just do one project and they're one and done. These guys are coming back to you 2-3 times a year, or they're running projects by you for quotes, or they're trying to get one done a year, and they're always on to the next 2 or 3, immediately, which their timeline is 2 or 3 years out. So I think that with the specific people that I'm referring to, there's still markets that are very high. We haven't seen anything, we didn't want to touch anything in Utah. And there's a municipality out there that's one of the largest growing, I've never even heard of it. And wow, that feasibility study came back at 330 units all day long, and he's jumping all over that. He's got the trees there. So
it's amazing, these little niche markets. Those little niche markets. Robert, I want to go to you from a title standpoint. Certainly in 2022, both on the conventional side and on the commercial side, title slowed down, but maybe you can give us a view, especially as it pertains to commercial. What are you hearing from investors that use your services?
So we have definitely seen a slowdown on the commercial side, but on the commercial side, it's absolutely we're seeing, again, we focus New York, New Jersey, and for us, we're seeing a lot of people taking down these assets on the high money side, or the expectations of, banks being in 6 to 12 months, just to asset under, ownership. I think a lot of people are forecasting that it's going to increase up a little bit in the next 6 to 12. And there's currently one on the street, so there's an opportunity to be able to acquire something not to overpay on these assets and be able to get it for a reasonable price. For us, we're obviously on the transaction. We're transactional, so for us, we're there on the acquisition and usually on the refinance, we're on the debt of these properties. So we go back and forth with investors directly, working with the banks, and we just want to make sure that we're getting this process as smooth as possible. When people are acquiring these distressed properties, it's our job to make sure that it gets into the investor's hand as soon as possible. We want them to kind of liens or judgments on the property, so we don't do whether it's to sell, rehab it, or the debt on it. We don't have any issues with that 6 to 12 months.
So let me follow up here with you because we have seen, at least at LICA and RCN, we've seen a significant tick up in fraud. There's been a lot going on in the last 6 to 12 months, and Larry, I'm sure you've seen this. But from a title perspective, maybe you can share with the audience, investors, how many folks are investors today owning properties for rental income? So a significant number of the audience, maybe share with the audience what they should be thinking about from a title perspective when it comes to the potential of fraud and things that they need to worry about when they're getting ready to close.
I think the number one thing right now is just being careful with the wire. You want to double confirm the constant call, check back with the counsel and the title company before you send it to the document. All right, so that is the biggest thing in our space right now is there's maybe anything else and trying to be able to send it to someone. But that is the number one thing. As far as any other fraud goes within the industry, it's as tight as it can be. On the side of guys, I think it just comes from people that are scamming. They scan the emails, and they're waiting for them to do, all right, for police file over 50,000. Maybe the phone calls last double. Always check the two people, check the wire instructions. Do not assume that anything is. So you got to wire it right away. That's not the case. No one should ever be rushing to send money out. So you got to refer back to your team, which is the title, and you're going to make sure you get those.
So Larry, I'm going to give you that same question. What do you see today from a fraud perspective? What should investors in the audience, and really real estate professionals as well, what should they be thinking about today that's maybe changed from pre-COVID?
Well, just speaking to the fraud issue first, is you always see an uptick in fraud when the markets are tight. People need to do deals, and they're presenting deals to lenders that just fake flips to themselves, fake contracts. Main Street title aside, title companies are a big problem. We found a tremendous uptick in title company fraud. In our office, we have processes implemented that we vet every title company directly with the underwriters in many other ways. So we have seen an uptick, particularly in Florida, a lot of problems with title companies, but you see it all over. So it's very important, whatever attorney you're using for your transaction on the lending side, that you make sure that they're working with reputable title companies and actually checking who's actually operating, whether they're licensed to do so and authorized agents to do so. In terms of the deals, well, from our perspective, this is what we do. We're representing the lenders, we're there to protect. So the minute the file comes in, we have a certain review process where we're vetting every word of that contract, the LLC documents, checking through everything. And we're able to detect a lot of things that just don't make sense, that get by the lenders. A lot of lenders, you have their in-house closing departments that come to us to give it a second look, and we're often finding many issues with those files. So I would just say, if it looks too good, it probably isn't. So I would be very careful with the deals that you're doing, the flips, certainly the wholesale deals, assignments of contracts. These are all types of deals that you start to see more of in these markets, and the intent is to go up. Personally, I've been doing this for 30 years with lenders, representing investors. Back in the early 2000s, I was representing probably the largest fix and flip investor in Brooklyn and Queens. And through that, I got to learn what fraud really is and what to look for, and the operators in the business in the local markets. And I've been able to take those skills that I learned and bring it globally to our firm and our practice. And now everybody is trained specifically target fraud. Representing private lenders, that's number one, because that's where it has to stop, and that's where our job is to protect and review all the documents in the transaction.
So, assignment of contract. I was going to let you off the hook and move on to our next subject. But in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, as a lender, we see assignments of contract more than anywhere else in the United States. Share with the audience what they should be looking for when they see them, because it's a really common thing. What should folks be looking for?
Well, from the investor end, someone comes and they bring you a deal. They're not the seller. They're not the owner of the property. I'm sure everybody who raised their hand here who's an investor, it's happened to, and it happens all the time. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with it or illegal about it, but it can be. It could be 2 or 3 people who've already tried to flip that contract pass it on to somebody else before it gets to you. And the further on down the line you get, generally there are issues there. So I would definitely be, as an investor, pay attention to who's the owner of the property. And nowadays, particularly people operating here in the boroughs, you go on Acris, they're presenting you a deal. John Smith is giving you, he's the seller, but on Acris it doesn't say that. It's a very easy thing that you as an investor can just check. And certainly whatever counsel you're using, they're a resource to do that as well. But it's a common practice here. There are people who maybe in this room, that's how they make their living. They're good at finding deals. They're good at finding properties. They have guys out on the street knocking on doors. At least that's what we used to do back in the days. Putting notes in people's mailboxes. Whatever ways they get the deals. But they don't have the money they execute. They have no interest to buy that property and really fix it and flip it, but he does. They have a relationship, and they're bringing you solid deals, and you will see that, and it can be completely valid. However, our job representing the investor who is buying that deal, well, we're vetting that as well. And certainly from the lending perspective, that's a very big issue with the lenders, because often lenders don't want to lend on the flipped price. They want to lend against the true price, which is the first part of the price. So our job in that respect is to really provide the information to the lender what we're seeing and how far down the line it goes. And then I'll leave it to the guys like Jeff to figure out what they actually want to lend on in that particular deal.
I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing that with the audience. That's so important today. Okay, so quick poll of the audience. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and then I'm going to have you raise your hand for each one. The 2 questions are going to be as follows. As an investor or real estate professional, do you care more about leverage or price? Okay, first question. As an investor or real estate professional, do you care more about leverage? Come on, let me see them. As a professional, do you care more about price? Okay, so that's where we're going next. Enrique, I'm going to start with you. As the real estate market has changed over the past, let's say, 12 to 18 months, lenders have had to make some tough decisions. Leverage, price. As a lender, how have you folks worked through that, and what's it look like today?
Right now, we're lending off the appraised value of the property, no matter how much they pay for the property. I'm working on a deal now where they want $1.8 million for the property that covers it. When you want it, you had to come up with $1.1 million. We dropped the price to $1.5 million. My client had to come up with $800,000. So now I told them we want the property to come offer $1.2 million. That way you come up with $500,000. No matter what, we're going to give you $750,000. No matter where you go, the property's going to debt service for $750,000. It's your dream, not mine. My dream is to close the deal with me. So you really have to look at the long run for you. Whether the property is worth it and is it going to be worth more money in the future. We're just looking at a property in Hoboken where the rents were $1,000 to $900 a unit. That if it was market rent, it's worth $3.9 million. They want $3.9 million for the property. I told them they're crazy. I'm not, there's no way you're going to evict the tenants and get them rents up to market rent, which is $2,500. If you want to play the long game, deal with it. But we just did a property in Patterson where we sold properties and nobody was paying rent. The guy paid me top dollar. He's a big name. They have deep pockets. They have very deep pockets. They paid cash for the properties. It's $3.8 million, 33 unit buildings. Then they're going to deal with it. They're going to deal with the long money paying the tenants and fix it and increase the rents. So everybody's different. It depends on how deep your pockets are, how long you've been doing this for. If you're a beginner, you shouldn't even touch it. If you've been around for a long time, you know the laws of the city, people, the tenants, you know how you can handle it with evictions. So there's 2 different ways to look at it. Depends on how deep your pockets are.
Love it. Sam, same question to you. Leverage, price. How are you thinking through it?
Yeah, I think for us, we kind of like risk off when things were kind of crazy late Q3, early Q4 by kind of just taking some certain asset classes and just pausing them. So like for multifamily and some multifamily bridge, even the mixed use, we can just kind of pause all that side of it and concentrate more on the 1 to 4 family. Our credit box is probably a little more conservative than most, but for the folks that hit our bid, we reward them with a great price. So I guess if that kind of answers your question. We look for experienced investors. We're not a first-time shop, so we can offer. I feel that comes through in our price too. So for us, it's been concentrating a little more on a higher quality sponsor. Recently, we have expanded a little leverage. There's some shake up in the market, especially in the 1 to 4 family residential space, where some larger private lenders exited, and we've kind of stepped back in there gently. But yeah, nothing crazy out there like it was a couple years ago, for sure.
Is this something, as a private lender, Sam, is this something that is a moving target? Like, how often is the internal leadership thinking about this? Are the markets driving what decisions you have to make? As investors, how should they think about when things are going to change, or will they change?
think it's twofold, right? So I think on the more homogeneous type of 1 to 4 family, we're going to kind of just do what we do. On some of the more larger portfolio deals, we see money come in and money go out sometimes weekly. You know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was 3-year money in there, out there, and then it kind of disappeared. And now you've got 1-year swaps at 5%, and it's inverted yield curve. It's a moving target, I think, on that side.
It's interesting, right? And I think that's good feedback for everyone in the audience today. It is a moving target. Lenders don't necessarily have all the answers, but that moving target is the same game that we all have to play. And I'm going to put the same question to you. Leverage, price, how do you folks think about it?
So, with us, it becomes more complicated for the internal valuation process because we're doing vacant, unstabilized properties as well as stabilized. So we're also giving rehab money. So our initial loan will always be based off of the as-is value. And I came from the residential world years ago, and one of the things I love about the commercial arena is that at the end of the day, first and foremost, it's about the income approach. We don't do any 1 to 4s. We are true commercial nationwide. First and foremost, it's about that building. We do non-recourse. We don't even pull the borrowers in order of the entity's credit. So you're going non-recourse, you're basing everything against that asset. So you better well know where you stand, whether you're doing the tertiary market in Bessemer, Alabama, or I'm doing Hoboken, Richmond, Queens. And one of the things that I reiterated, for as much as we do distress situations, maturity defaults, value-added deals, I'm seeing many on the bankable side because they're hedging their position. Why should I take a 10% SBA deal when I can get a deal in the high 11s, 12s, interest only, non-recourse, close quickly, get the capital I need, or acquire the property I need. But one of the things about us is we're not a loan-to-own non-bank lender. So we will always ensure that your borrower has an exit strategy. So your loan may come in the door looking for $3 million, and you may end up turning around and saying, hey, and that's a juggling act for us. You have to forecast rates 12 months down the road to ensure that Mr. or Mrs. Jones can exit the bank deal with another loan.
Especially in your asset class, Ed, right? It's been challenging, and it's only gotten more challenging with the well-publicized bank failures that, let's face it, they lent in a space that was needed in the United States. And many of those folks are most likely turning to private lending, such as your firm. So, how do you think about changing the ability to be able to allow leverage when there may be an exit strategy that is not there anymore that used to be there? How do you handle that?
So we're still where we were from day one. We're at 70% loan to value, purchase price, or as is value, whichever is less. Okay. On all the asset classes that I mentioned earlier, except for office, for the obvious reason. So office we reduced to 60%, and that's pretty obvious as this country figures out when you're going to reinvent how people work from home or what's going to happen. But I think that office space mess is more so in the larger asset classes, not in the realm that we play in, from 500K to 10 million. I see a flocking of a lot of inner city acquisitions of office to suburban, and repurposing those properties to do rework or for their own business and other things as well.
Great, and I'm going to, William, go to you. Certainly, let's stay on this asset class. Leverage, price, how do you folks think about it?
I mean, with what we're seeing right now, it's most of our clients are looking for leverage. Obviously, price. You don't want to run into the debt service constraint problems that a lot of these developers are having because the cost of goods has gone up. They have a lot of hard costs. They put a lot of time and effort into exactly what they have to purchase to build these properties, and all of a sudden their quote, their hard cost changes and our quote changes, and now they're debt service constrained. We are 9% loan to cost on a 4-year fixed rate, so they're leveraging their property to max 118 debt service to a 120 on acquisitions and refis. So, I'm sorry, so we're seeing it, but also the conventional banks are getting a lot of business from them because they've just paused, even with their high leverage. They're coming to us now. We just had an influx of deals from the commercial conventional banks because they're running out of money, because they're scared, because societies are taking a run at them and taking their money out so quickly that they are on the sidelines for these apartment complexes. The type of lender that we are, we're 100% backed and secured by the full faith of the U.S. government. That used to mean something.
I'm pretty sure it still does.
It does. So we can't technically 9 months down the road run out of money for the bridge lenders when our commitment is worth its weight in gold, because we had that a couple of months. That's never going to happen with us, which is why we're doing very well right now on the conventional side. With better borrowers and better experience, they're willing to bite the bullet for us on the leverage side of things and wait the time that it takes us to do the deals because these banks are saying no. And they've always said yes to them. They might have $100 million and they're saying no to this deal. You can imagine they're pulling all their money out right away. So we're seeing a lot of that. Leverage is important to our clients. That's what they're looking for.
Is there any geography considerations to this in the field you play?
There is. It's heavily based off the feasibility and market study of it. HUD also wants to make sure that we're not heavily concentrated in one geographic, meaning 300 units might have had a HUD deal 5 years ago. They don't want to build another one right next to it for natural disasters and all sorts of different things. They don't want to have that kind of exposure, which is important as well.
Makes sense. So we're going to switch topics now. We're going to talk a little bit about New York City, some of the changes that have been made in rental guidelines. Larry, I'm going to start with you. Then I'm just going to kind of open it up, as some folks are going to have expertise in this area, others aren't. But some of the different guidelines that have come out of Albany and out of New York City, and I would love for you to share with the audience how this has affected your customers, which at the end of the day are private lenders serving investors and real estate professionals. What has happened and how has it affected folks?
Even today, speaking to a lot of people that I haven't seen in a while, brokers, investors, lack of confidence. The way the city treats landlords in general, the inability to evict people, getting no support from the court system. People just don't have to pay and really have a very difficult time getting them out. So as an investor, if you want to buy a property, how confident can you be if you want to buy that property and make any projections where people just don't have to pay? And that's a fact. That's from personal experience. I'm experienced in real estate. I've been buying and selling real estate for over 20 years and operating as a landlord. And this is the sentiment that I'm getting from clients. So there is that lack of confidence in the ability to evict. That has a lot to do with it. In terms of the pressure on the rents, it's not really my bag, the rent stabilization laws and the rents, but I do know that they're actually looking to make that a little better for landlords, at least in the last laws that were proposed in Albany. But nevertheless, even with those increases, the cost, the increase in taxes, the water bills are off the hook in New York City, and it's also a fact that you own properties in the boroughs, the ticketing, coming around and giving ECB tickets, sanitation tickets, whatever ticket they can find to give you, they're going to give you when they add up, and that's because they need to generate revenue as a result of the lack of tax dollars that are coming into New York, the office, everything, some of the topics that we've talked about already. So that's what I see.
Has this affected the number of closings that you're doing in New York City proper?
I don't know if I can necessarily quantify that. It's just also not a lot of, I don't think you really see that. I think that's more attributable to there's just not a lot of properties to buy. There still is supply and demand issue. There's a demand for properties and there's just not that many. So I don't really necessarily think that that's affecting it, but people that I'm talking to, I do have a lot of clients that have just sold out in the last couple of years and they put their money somewhere else. A lot of the New York money has gone to Florida. I shouldn't be the first one telling you that. It's been all over the news, but it's true. Someone today was just telling me guy that I haven't seen in a while, he pretty much sold all his properties, and it's either on the sideline or did 1031s into other states.
Interesting. Any other panelists like to chime in on how different laws that have changed are affecting you as lenders or professionals in the space?
I'll tell you that I am definitively seeing in that 48 states more northeastern-based investors flocking to the Tennessees, the Ohios, the Michigans, the North Carolinas. And the fact that we do mobile home parks and self-storage facilities, which are a great investment, because you don't have to worry about evicting Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and you have a self-storage facility. Padlock it and be done with it. You know, I'm just seeing from not only myself but my sales reps an enormous amount that are based in this area that are purchasing and looking for deals in other parts of the country.
Makes
less expensive to operate, more landlord friendly.
Makes total sense. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about products that private lenders are offering, or maybe a sneak peek into some of the products that you folks are working on to solve some of the challenges that real estate professionals have today. Sam, I'll start with you. Products that maybe you rolled out that are solving, whether it be ground up, multi, just kind of hit on things that are solving some of the new challenges today, and anything you might have coming down the pipe.
Yeah, I think probably one of the main ones to bring liquidity to either large real estate investors or institutional investors was providing a short-term facility to refinance these balloons that are coming due. Typically, if you have someone that has 50 houses and they're refinancing that portfolio, it's usually written on a 5 or 7 or 10-year balloon. Not a lot of confidence in locking in for that term right now. So, bringing in something where it's 12 or 24 months, like a bridge type scenario, and then maybe they can reposition their portfolio. Like, do I really want these 40 assets in this geography? Maybe I want to lighten it there, or maybe I want to reinvest into Ohio or Tennessee, or it might be, like you said earlier. But I think providing short-term liquidity for portfolios is probably the thing that we've seen more interest in. Now, unfortunately, short-term rates went up a lot in the last 6 months, 9 months, but still, there's liquidity there that wasn't there before.
Right now, we're doing the fix and flips and rehab loans, but we're looking at the investors that's been around, has experience. The newbies, it's harder. They don't know what they're doing. A lot of them get upset. They don't realize it's not buying a house and getting approved. Like you said, it's not that easy to evict tenants. It's not easy getting permits in the city. So we're just being more cautious on some of the deals. We're doing 75 to 70% of the value. But we're just looking at it, at the experience of the borrower, the location, where it's at, and the tenants, whether we're going to be able to get the tenants or not.
Are there any products, any loan products that folks are asking you for that maybe haven't quite come to fruition yet? Whether it be the ability to be able to buy the courthouse now, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything that you're hearing that investors today are kind of clamoring for that's not quite there yet?
I mean, the new construction, everybody for whatever reason wants to be developed. A lot of guys who they did 2 or 3 fix and flips. Now they want to build a brand new house. And I think that's what everybody's been looking for lately. It's hard. It's not going to exist for a while. We've never done it before. It's not going to happen unless you put a big down payment and you put half of the project yourself. Then maybe we look at it. But I think that's the biggest thing that everybody, for a reason, they want to build a house.
Sure. William, to you. And certainly in your marketplace, you're seeing larger deals. But what are folks asking for? What do you maybe have coming down the line?
We're actually seeing a lot of new construction as well. Almost probably 90% of our new submissions are all new construction, which is never really the case actually. And it's pretty remarkable because you would think, rates are going up, they have gone up even with us, and so the refinance isn't as attractive to them. But we're still seeing some of that, but I would say 90% are all new construction in all the markets in the states that you had mentioned before, Tennessee, Ohio, Texas, Arizona, all the Carolinas and even some down in Georgia. There's a lot. Sometimes it's even so saturated that we can't even look at it. But most importantly, it comes down to the developer. They have to have that experience, not just building, but also managing those properties. You may have 30 units and then you inherit land from grandpa and you want to, you're zoned for 300. It's not the same animal. You're not going to be approved by us. So we're running into that problem a lot too. I have land, I have zero debt on it. I want to build I'm permitted for 300 units. Unfortunately, you have to hire a HUD-approved management company. There are definitely more hoops with us. And that doesn't go over so well with them because no management company really wants to take on that kind of liability without an equity play as well. So now you're running kinds of developer, and it kind of goes to the wayside, which is why we use bridge lenders. Take them out on refi. So
Interesting. So I have to follow up on one of the items that you touched on, which was saturation in the marketplace, which as single-family lenders, which we're one of, and we have a lot of lenders on the panel that focus on single-family, like we can't imagine saturation, right? Like no matter what geography we play in, there's not enough single-family houses. Whereas you're mentioning multi, my guess is Class A, there are some marketplaces reaching saturation.
there are, and you also have to pay attention to municipalities and listen to that. We've had a lot of people that go and want to build apartment complexes. Right here in New Haven, actually, Connecticut, there's one. The municipality wants an assisted living facility. They're willing to give 3 elementary schools to the developer for $1. We do assisted living in nursing homes as well, ground up construction. So we changed everything into that market, and that's a little easier to get an entrant company in. You do have to have experience with that as well. You can imagine the headaches of running one of those with all the Medicare and Medicaid and the elderly and the family fighting and everything that they deal with is insane. I'm sure some of us have experienced that. So if you can get over those hurdles and get that done, now the municipality is telling the same developer, we'll let you build 75 units over here on this property because they know they need it in that area. So sometimes when you go to the town or the city and say, hey, I have X, Y, and Z, what would you like? You know, I want to build 100 units here, what does the town need? You'd be amazed because nobody ever asks that question. They go to the town and say, I'm going to build you apartments or I'm going to build you assisted living and nursing homes. It's very rare that we have a developer actually go and sit down with the town council and say, what do you guys need? What do you think you need more of? And you get a lot further and a lot less restrictions when you go down that direction.
Interesting. Super great feedback. Thank you. And I'm going to go right back to the same question. What are folks asking for today that maybe is new? And what is maybe coming down the road?
So, you know, on the tail end of COVID, the need for working capital, early in last spring, we rolled out a product called Express Bridge. It has nothing to do with the time frame. It still takes the same amount of time, 18 to 21 days. But what it is, and the real niche of the program was, it allowed owner-occupied. So take, for example, think about this for a single tenant, owner-occupied, restaurant, bar, and grill, to go up to 60% loan to value, non-recourse, no credit pull, no financials. So that was something we rolled out. It's been very popular. I'll give you an example of a loan we funded. A modular manufacturing company in South Carolina, light industrial property. Couldn't wait for the SBA. Lots of orders outstanding. Needed working capital. We did a $10 million loan amount. 6.5 of it was cash out. In their hand, not controlled by us. It was about 52 loan to value. No financials, non-recourse. Closed in about 20 days.
It was awesome.
Broken in a substantial fee on that loan. So you'd be hard pressed, as I tell people, to find a lender that's going to give that kind of working capital, uncontrolled out, number one. Number two, the thought of this is the only tenant. So if he or she goes south, and that's why we hang our hat, we have to hang our hat on evaluations. So we get a lot of requests, obviously, from Herman. It's something that's in the works for us, so we kind of want to make it at some point a one-stop shop for us. We can actually help them with the exit.
Perfect, perfect. And Robert, I want to go go back to you, because you see this on the title side. When different products roll out and different lenders are getting lenders policy, how does that all change, right? From a title perspective, how does that change with different products, things that investors and professionals should think about?
On our side, it kind of stays what we say. Whatever the product is, it comes to us to go through the acquisition. It's still very much the same process. We search the property, we issue it, we go through the process. Sometimes there's additional endorsements that happen when the policy to come with a different product, but for us, very much
So that's interesting. As a lender, there's always certain endorsements that we want as lenders. Larry, I'm sure you're working with title endorsements are a big part of what you demand from your title companies. So, Robert, when folks ask for endorsements, maybe share with the audience how that works and whether or not you're able to do it and why.
Again, a lot of those endorsements are just kind of like, we're blessed by the number of certain aspects of the case ask for the portion of the property and kind of presents to them as a lender, and we really go to sell that to the next investor. Again, endorsements don't go too much on the source side. We're not looking to add anything additional. It's not like our benefit to try to put on endorsements out on the deal. Again, it's just kind of the way our policy, just secure ownership.
That makes sense. Larry, I'll finish up this part of the conversation with you. As a lender representative, when we get into that area of endorsements, at the end of the day, the real estate professionals, typically as investors or liaisons, are the ones who are being protected. What should we think about with endorsements? Because sometimes certain title companies just don't give it to us.
Well, every state has different endorsements that they actually get. What Florida will get versus New York is very different. All endorsements really are just additional coverages. So what a title policy is, it's an insurance policy. So you as the investor or the buyer, you're getting a policy of insurance protecting your children. Lender is getting a policy of insurance from the title company that's protecting their investment, which is the loan. All the endorsements are additional coverages. Depending on the type of property that is, that really determines what type of endorsements you need, such as if it's a construction loan, there are different coverages that are necessary based on future disbursements. If it is a piece of vacant land, there are certain survey coverages that you're going to want to have that you don't need when it's a single-family property. So it is driven by the asset. And in terms of the different loan types, he's correct. There's really not much differences based on loan type. The only thing that I can think of right now that jumps out is it's a variable rate. You get a special variable rate endorsement. Sometimes there are swaps. There's a swap endorsement also that's a little bit more sophisticated. But it doesn't really change based upon both products.
Perfect. So we're coming up to the end of our time here, and what I'm going to ask the panelists is we're going to ask Gabe a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace and where we're going when we all get together again. So maybe talk about how you think private lending in your area that you manage is going to help solve the problems. And I'm going to start down the end here with you, William, and we'll just work our way down the panel. Kind of give the audience a feel for what you think is coming down the road.
I think, listen, we've been here before. Interest rates go up, interest rates go down, and there's a refinance boom like we've all seen. I've missed it 3 times before, and I'm missing it this time. I'm coming out, that's lazy. But people are still buying houses, people are still buying properties. It's 7, 8, 9% conventional fixed over 30 years right now. We're seeing it from banks all over the place. When the rates come down, there's going to be a refinance boom. But back to the private lending standpoint, I think there's always going to be a market there just based off reason and logic. And you pop something in my head when you're talking. It sounds like you guys lend off reason and logic along with evaluation, as opposed to a lot of these conventional banks, which are just crunching numbers and hitting enter and saying yes or no. We've all been there, we all know that. That's why we exist. So I think that when that refinance boom comes, there's going to be a lot of traction, even obviously what we're seeing on the construction now. There's going to be a lot more money on the sidelines that needs to be used. You know, some of these funds that are out there too have the non-usage fee. They're trying to hemorrhage money, and you know, from my standpoint, we're seeing more and more permanent takeouts from the bridge lenders, and it doesn't seem like it's going to slow down because they're continuously lending. You guys are all continuously lending through all this. So I think we're going to be in good shape in the next 3 to 5.
I think William's fired up. What do you folks think? I think so. I love it. Ed?
So I think, you know, rates are rates, right? We can't control that. They are what they are. A smart investor understands it's a cost of doing business. But many of them, as I said previously, are not throwing the baby out of the bed. And stay power is what it's all about. And I think being with a transparent lender, knowing who you're doing business with, and that they're going to be there to fund the deal is very important. And as Bill said, even prior to, you know, private lenders, non-bank lenders, we were busy before, and now it's just exacerbated the issue and the amount of business coming in because those blinders that the traditional banks are even greater than they were previously. So I think we realize and understand we're more than likely not going to have an economic genius, but I'd be willing to bet anyone in this room to the pinnacle of rates. Coming up to an election year in a little bit, couldn't come soon enough. That's a whole other topic, but I think that will affect rates in a positive manner as well. So those people that have hedged their position and gone forward with their projects with a non-bank lender will benefit from that down the road.
Perfect. Robert?
Okay, kind of being on the settlement side, also on the industrial side, really intelligent, had conversations for all that. We are kind of on the first of this, and it is going to improve. I still believe something like that. I was talking to you, you want to provide. So when you're trying to provide whatever project you want to do, it's okay to make some disrespectful offers. Go for it. You never know when these guys are working exactly. So be aggressive right now. Again, this is what we do.
Perfect. Sam, where are we going?
So I think you mentioned the most interesting thing that might happen over the next year when we see each other again. I think it's going to be the transformation of loan balances from bank balance sheets to non-bank balance sheets. And what's that look like? Is it a portfolio on the balance sheet? Is it the securitization market comes back stronger than ever? Time will tell. Like, I think that's what we should watch.
I can't help but bring that up. Non-bank balance sheets. It's going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer. Well said, Sam. Enrique.
I've been in this market since the 90s. Then, right now, you just got to be careful what you buy. I think we're going to see a lot of sales, a lot of foreclosures within the next couple of years or the next 6 months. You're going to see a lot of business. You just have to be careful what you're going to buy and do your homework. Then, like I said, you want to put up more money because the investor is going to give you a certain amount of money based on whatever they feel it is. Come up with a difference. I think there's going to be a lot of foreclosures. There's going to be a lot of money to be made again in this market. In the low rates.
Perfect. Larry.
Opportunities. I see a market like this. I see opportunities for investors. I see opportunities for lenders. But patience is very important right now. Everyone has said it on this panel. You got to be patient. Don't force the issue. It's not easy. Build your team. Very important when things may be a little bit slower. Build your team. See what you can improve on. Get with the right lender. Get with the right attorneys. People who understand the business. So that when you need to execute, you can execute. That's the key to dealing with private lenders. And separate the talkers and the brokers from the lenders that can execute. Particularly on the bridge side, on the SFRs, on the single families, the small multi-families. Be with lenders and professionals that can deliver for you when you get that good deal and you're exhibiting that patience.
Well said. just give you my final thoughts, which are, I believe Fannie Freddie loan rates are going to be back in the 5s in the not too distant future, in the very not too distant future. That's going to spur investment as well as owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied in all corners of this country once we get back below that 6%. That's really the key to everything. We saw it in January when rates dipped below 6% briefly. There was a tremendous surge in contracts written across the United States. We're getting close there. We're getting really close. I believe that on the private lending side, investors will continue to not only buy, fix, and sell, they will buy, fix, and make good, affordable homes, both multi and single family, across the United States for families to live in. More to come, and couldn't be more excited. Folks, let's give this panel a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Next panel will be on for 10 minutes.